Hi, everyone. I'm Jenna Paone. Welcome to Lit Chick on a Mighty Blaze. I'm so thrilled today. I have Christina Clancy here to talk about her steamy new novel, Shoulder Season. Welcome, Christina. How are you?
Great. Thank you, Jenna, for having me. I'm so excited to be on Mighty Blaze. And thanks for all you've been doing for all the pandemic authors.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. I mean, we love, obviously, we're all authors. We love other authors. Our founders, Jenna Blum and Caroline Levitt, are so incredible. And we're so grateful to everyone on the team who gets these great books out there. And I'm thrilled to welcome you to the Blaze family and talk about your book. It was so fun. I love Shoulder Season. Can you tell everyone at home just a little bit about the book? Give us kind of like your elevator pitch. We never do spoilers or anything like that, but just give us a little rundown on the book and a little bit about what inspired you to write it.
Oh, sure. Well, the book is written about a really interesting and unusual time in history, which is from 1969 to 1981, believe it or not, right in the middle of Wisconsin cornfields, there was a Playboy Resort that Hugh Hefner opened. It's fairly close to Chicago, so it was meant to be like the playground for Hefner from his Playboy Mansion in Chicago. And I started working on a book about a woman her name's Sherry Taylor. She's 59, and 40 years ago, she was a bunny. And she needs to come back to East Troy, which is a neighboring town that's close to where the Playboy Resort was, to deal with some unfinished business and address a tragedy that took place in the heady days of her youth when she was making lots of mistakes and living a wild life as a bunny. But even though it sounds super wild, actually what I found that was so interesting was that the resort was considered a family resort. And there were tons of rules that dictated the women's behavior. And it was also like a sisterhood because they lived in a dorm. So there's just so much to write about. And, how do we discover what kind of men are good men? How do we become our best selves? How do we forgive ourselves for the mistakes we made in the past? Like, those are all themes that I try to write about.
I love that. Christina, I'm realizing it must be Tropical Storm Elsa today, but I forgot to do your bio at the beginning, which I always do. So I'm going to go back and do your bio real quick, and then we're going to get back and just talking, just because I want everyone who's joining us to know how awesome you are. Christina Clancy is the author of Shoulder Season and The Second Home, which is soon to be a limited series starring Nikolai Coster-Waldau from Game of Thrones. Her work has appeared in the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Chicago Tribune, and in magazines like The Sun, Glimmer Train Stories, Hobart, the Minnesota Review, and elsewhere. She has a PhD in English from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, and she lives in Madison, Wisconsin. Her new novel, Shoulder Season, is a dazzling portrait of a young woman coming into her own, the youthful allure of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and what we lose and gain when we leave home. Shoulder Season has been named a best book of summer by Good Morning America, Parade, EW, Travel and Leisure, Pop Sugar, Brit & Co., She Reads, and Women.com. BuzzFeed calls Shoulder Season the perfect beach read. The New York Post says it's a burst of heady independence and excitement that develops into a love triangle with tragic results. And SheKnows.com calls it a striking portrayal of a glamorous piece of history. So if you missed Christie's description of her book, it's about this Playboy Resort, a woman who ends up working at the Playboy Resort in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. It's so interesting. I mean, there's always this like allure of like the Playboy brand and like the Playboy resorts, and especially the like older, I feel like that kind of vintage glamour. And obviously it's like such a complex thing too, and it's such a complex legacy and problematic in so many ways, but also there are a lot of liberating factors and things like that. Like, it's just such an interesting topic. What was the kernel of the idea for this book? How did you become interested in the history of Playboy? How did you decide to set a story here? Talk us through like what led you to this book?
Oh, sure. Thanks. And you know what I love that you said that you bring up that I think about all the time is how Playboy as a brand is a moving target. Everyone has a different association with Playboy based on different times and the way they thought of it. So old Playboy really was considered super classy.
Yeah.
And as the brand kind of evolved and changed and had to compete with Hustler and Penthouse, it started to become more kind of like, I hate to use the word tacky.
Yeah, no.
People think of it as kind of tacky. And I was worried people would resist this novel if that was their impression.
Mm-hmm.
In some ways, I think I addressed that head on, with the,
you do.
And the stigma that the women live with. But the book started because we have a cottage on Lake Beulah in Wisconsin, and it's in East Troy, which is the town where my book is set. My husband's family has been there for generations. His great-grandfather opened the hardware store on the town square. And then recently, it was so interesting, a bookstore opened in that exact same place. And I kind of felt like all my worlds collided in that place. So I've always wanted to write about East Troy because it has such an interesting history. And I also I bristle sometimes at, and maybe a whole bunch of this book is in response to me defending things that I hated defending. But I feel like people are really hard on small towns, including people who are from them, like Sherry, where they're, I think, and maybe that's changing because a lot of people are moving now after COVID.
Yeah, we're in a weird place, right?
Like where life kind of is slower and makes more sense and is easier. But I wanted to write about that. And then I started a book that I thought would be kind of like a big chill novel with a bunch of people who are reuniting on Lake Beulah after someone had drowned in the lake. And I wanted to have them do this thing every year, like a triathlon for the person who had passed away. And I thought, how did they end up on the lake? I need some sort of story how they got there. And there was a really famous Playboy bunny. It's really one of the only tawdry stories I can find from the resort, but Laurencia Benick. If you ever Google Free Bambi or Laurencia Benick, it's a really famous story in Wisconsin, but she had been a Playboy bunny and she was accused of murdering her lovers. So that was a big deal. So I was thinking about that. And then I thought, what if the mother was a Playboy bunny?
Yeah.
I just needed to find a little bit of information, just enough to make her seem credible. So I started researching articles. And then I was like, I need to talk to some of these former Playboy bunnies. And then I did. And then before I knew it, it was such a weird world. It was so interesting. And I was like, wait a minute. I can write about the Playboy Resort. Playboy, it completely sucked the oxygen out of the story I was going to write because it was so weird and so fascinating. My friend Liam described it as a story that was hidden in plain sight.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I knew that Lake Geneva was such a as an area. I don't think I knew that it was such a that this existed there. You think of the Playboy clubs being in the big cities and this resort, it makes perfect sense though, with the brand at the time of this wholesome Americana kind of looking for the girls next door. It makes sense that it was this place. But did you know about it before? Did you know about this, say your whole life, growing up, that there used to be a Playboy Resort, or was that something that was new?
I knew that there was a resort somewhere because people from my high school, especially the guys, would go skiing and they would talk about being served hot chocolate by bunnies.
Oh God.
And I was like, that's kind of weird. And then when we had a family reunion at a hotel that's called the Grand Geneva, and when we were checking in, I saw this little curio cabinet off in the lobby. And I looked and I was like, oh, this is the Playboy Resort. And it just had some memorabilia, but it really was tucked away. I was like, if I ran this resort, I'd be like, we used to be a Playboy Resort. It just seemed so interesting to think of Sonny and Cher walking through the halls. And so I just, it's just such an interesting, fun place to write about.
It's so cool. I mean, it's such a great location and setting in general seems to be a big component of your work. I mean, both of the settings. So most of it takes place, at the Playboy Resort or around the surrounding lakes area, in Wisconsin and in East Troy. But you also do a beautiful rendering of California, particularly Palm Springs. And, there's some other locations as well. Is setting a big thing for you as an author? Is that something that inspires you? Are you somebody who it sounds like with this, you had the shell of a story that then got, taken a kind of in a different direction, specifically because of the location in which you were planning on setting this. Is that typical for you? Do you kind of start with setting, or do you start with a concept and then build a setting around it?
I usually start with character, actually, because I think without a character, a story can't really move. And it's interesting though, because I've talked to other writers who say they plot out a whole story, and the characters they view as just vehicles to move the plot along. So I'm the exact opposite. Like I start with the character, and I start, and I'm a pantser. I just kind of write as I go, and I throw them into a world, and I decide what's going to happen. But I'm very sensitive to my surroundings, and I sometimes I think I get like too attached to places, like I love them too much. Like it almost hurts, like when I was writing about Cape Cod, I was thinking a lot about how in Wellfleet, whenever I see other people enjoying their time there, I want to stop them and say, like, you don't love it as much as I do.
Oh my God, I'm the same way. I mean, like as a Cape Codder, like I'm so possessive of it. It's crazy, like how that happens though, where we feel ownership of a place. But that's like, it's kind of, so that's like, for me as a writer, like I'm super influenced by place. Like I specifically decided to write books because I was like, I want to write books about New England. Like that was specifically like a thing for me. Did you kind of think to yourself, I want to tell stories about the places I love? Did you think I want to like shine a light on Wisconsin? I want to shine a light on Cape Cod, these places that are important to me?
I kind of did. So my first book, I was working on a different book that was set in a place I don't like. And my friend said, I was stuck on it. And he said, why don't you write about a place you love?
Yeah.
And that's why I started writing about Cape Cod. And I bristle when people review that book. Like, I think Publishers Weekly said, like, with her eye firmly set on the vacation read market or the beach read market. And I was so offended because I was like, my family's had a place in Wellfleet since the 1880s. I was writing, it's a place I know and love. It's not because I never even thought I'd sell the book. I was like, I wasn't thinking like, how can I make this? I wasn't trying to be Elin Hildebrand,
Yeah.
So, and then with East Troy, I always knew I wanted to write about East Troy because I think it's so cool and interesting. Yeah. And California in shoulder season makes a ton of sense because I found, including myself, people in Wisconsin mythologize California. So like if you could think of a place that's our opposite, it's California. It seems so progressive and fun and happening and sunny, and you can have coffee outside in January. So I think that's natural that Sherry would want to end up there. And we actually spend a lot of time in Palm Springs, and I love it there. So it was fun to write about that place that I know. And Palm Springs is actually, it's kind of like East Troy. I thought, I got Sherry to Los Angeles. I don't think I'm giving anything away. The prologue even starts in Palm Springs. Yeah. But I got Sherry to Los Angeles. She eventually moves to Palm Springs because she's a small town girl. Palm Springs would feel so much more manageable for her.
Yeah. And Sherry's a really, I so appreciate Sherry as a character. This all of your characters are so complex and interesting and deeply flawed, but you really want to root for them. I feel like and you are, as you said, a character driven writer. I mean, right? That's why we write, because we want to tell stories about people. We want to tell stories about interesting people. And especially in this world, which is a world of women, but is a world where there's a world that is both liberating and oppressive, right? To women, which is a really interesting thing to write about. How was it for you tackling this subject as a female writer in 2021, in an age that is very different, and how we discuss, sex, and how we discuss female agency and, sexism and role of women and everything in totally different terms. And also it's not all that different. And like some things are totally the same. What was it like for you to kind of confront this, this complex situation?
It was really interesting, and it was kind of hard because I felt like I needed to have something to say, but I didn't also want to seem ham-fisted. Where for the reader, they're like, this is a book about feminism. Like who wants to read that? You can have it kind of sneak in. So when I was working on the book, I stopped writing for a while because I thought, what is my take on Playboy? Because the more I learned about the jobs and the lives these women had, the more I kind of had this sneaking feeling like if I was alive in 1981 and living in East Troy, I would have totally done this. And like there's this line. I remember somebody said something about Midwestern people being nice. And they said, you're only nice if you have the luxury to be nice. And I thought about that a lot. I thought, maybe like if it was an apocalypse, I don't think I'd be nice. Like if I needed to defend my family, I would do anything to do that.
Yeah.
And I kind of think that thinking about your privilege when you think about feminism and Me Too and stuff is kind of interesting to think. If it was 1981 and I was working there, I might be thinking I'm not trying to, perpetuate the patriarchy.
Yeah.
I think we should actually shine the lens more on the men who create these systems. And, I think Gloria Steinem, when she wrote about Playboy, she went undercover as a Playboy bunny in a really famous essay. Yeah. And she had the best intentions. And I think in some ways, the way the women felt really stigmatized or like it was like they were looked down on was maybe a hard part of that peeling away. Yeah. The way things used to be. And they were kind of caught up in the middle of all of that and stuck in the vortex of that storm. So I don't know, it was really interesting to think about the reasons why women work there. But really, what else could you do?
Yeah.
If you're from a small town, you don't have the same opportunities. It's not like you're going to go to Smith and, or marry someone who's got a ton of money, maybe you will. And not like that's something that a feminist would aspire to anyway. I don't mean to sound like that, but, and then I was thinking about, I have a niece who's a bartender and she's really tough and cool. Like I just adore her. And she was talking about how when men come into the bar and sit down, because she's done that for a long time, she knows right away, like, don't mess with me. Like this guy's going to be trouble. This guy's great. I never had that education. I never. And so I think a lot of the women, they were exposed to a lot of different kinds of men and a lot of different situations, and it made them smart and savvy. Yeah. And it also made them really fun. Like they really learned how to have a good time. And I think there were parts of being a Playboy bunny that were incredibly liberating. And, and I kept thinking about how like good it feels when you're young to just feel like you're beautiful and sexy, and I really to embrace that and not make Sherry feel shamed for it.
I mean, I think you do a really good job of that. Like, I think you do a really good job of posing questions, but not like hammering down like lectures or answers. Like I found myself having more questions, which I think is always a good thing when I read a book, like of like, how do I think about this? Because like, the Playboy brand too, it's such an interesting thing. And it is like, when you're young, like I remember like, I'm a child of, I was born in the 80s and like grew up in the 90s and early 2000s. And like my friends and I, like our biggest aspiration in high school was to work at a bar like Coyote Ugly. And like, because like that was a big movie when I was in high school and we were like, we're all going to be coyotes. Like, I don't know. Like we just thought that was like going to be so fun and cool. And I remember I moved to New York and I went to the bar and I actually like got offered a job that night because we were like dancing on the bar. And they were like, oh, because I was like a classically trained ballerina and I like could actually dance. And they were like, oh, like you should do this. But like, and then I was like, oh no, I don't want this. Like, but it's such a funny thing because it's like you can imagine like it would be like kind of an honor to be asked to be a Playboy. Like I'd be like, oh, I'm kind of hot. Like this is kind of fun.
I love the way you say that. That's exactly how Sherry was. She was like, me? Like, I remember Bunny Tina, her mentor, says, you have such a great heart-shaped face. And Sherry's like, I have a heart-shaped face,
Yeah, it's really endearing. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your research of like uncovering, this world. And obviously, I mean, your book is set part contemporarily in 2019, but also primarily in the 80s, which is now historical fiction, which is hilarious. But it's like, which is so fun. But obviously you were alive in the 80s. But how much of this book required, a great amount of research, and what did that research look like? And can you kind of tell us some fun stories about things you discovered or people you spoke to? Tell us a little bit more about learning about this world.
Sure. Well, I'll talk about the bunnies in a second, but just while you were talking about your experience with Coyote Ugly, I was thinking about, so there's a scene in Shoulder Season where Sherry puts on her costume and she walks out on the floor the first time. And I don't know why, that was my favorite scene to write in the whole book. Because I thought, what would that be like? It's January, it's cold outside, she's wearing her costume. and she's got her hair, and for the first time she feels beautiful like that. So one of the things I did, I interviewed a woman who's here in Madison, and she was a Hooter girl. And I didn't know that Hooters had competitions and stuff. Did you know that? Like,
I think I knew that only because there was a Hooters near my college. I didn't even know Hooters was like a real thing until I went to college, and there was a Hooters in like upstate New York. Like I think some of the girls from school like did the Hooters competition.
It kind of felt like a modern day Playboy, but I met with her because I wanted to know, what does it feel like to be looked at all the time? Like, how did you process that? And one of the things she said that was so interesting, she said, so many of the men are just so sad.
Yeah.
And they come in here, they're really lonely, and they want to be around young, happy, beautiful women because they're sad. And I thought that was so interesting. Yeah. But then I also, for the book, I wanted to interview bunnies, and at first it was kind of hard to find people. I discovered that some of the bunnies there. First of all, southeastern Wisconsin is filled with former bunnies, and like I
love it, guys. Go to southeastern Wisconsin. That is where the bunnies are.
Like people would be like, they'd be like, I have a bunny in my book club. And I'm like, 40 years ago. You can say it out loud,
That's amazing. I kind of love this. Like, I kind of want to meet all these women and like go to a party with the bunnies. Like, they sound like a good time.
Truly, like you really do become friends with people too, and you get sucked into their world. But so I met with like one bunny I talked to. I had just been learning about how hard that job was, and just walking around in stiletto heels, 2-3 shifts at a time, and that small costume and all the demands. And she told me that she didn't want me to put her name in the book or anything or in the acknowledgments, because she said that her daughter didn't know that she was a bunny, and that she went through her attic one day and she found all these pictures of her. And it just struck me as so sad that someone could have that part of their life. And it was really just like not even a year that she was a bunny, and that is something that she didn't want to talk about. And then another bunny, Pam Ellis, she was Bunny JoJo when she was at the resort, and she was great because she's one of the very few bunnies who was there longer than a year. She was there for 4 years. Wow! So she had just a wealth of information, and she loved to wax nostalgic. Whenever we'd talk, she'd call me back, and she's like, "I've just been thinking about my Playboy days all week." It was just really moving, and so I met with her a lot, and she would always. One thing like if anyone out there is a writer and you're working on research, one thing I learned is you get the best content or the best material at the very end of a conversation. Like, you kind of wait while you're on the phone with them. And then all of a sudden, like one day I was talking to Bunny JoJo, and she said, I remember once we went to see this quack veterinarian in Chicago. All of us girls, we piled into a van and went to Chicago because he told us we could lose weight, and he injected us with hog tranquilizer. And I was like, what? Like,
way to bury the lead, like Bunny JoJo.
And so like I just got on my computer, like that meme of the cat like going like this, like that was me. I was like, there's got to be some. It just kind of snuck in there. That's like an Easter egg for people who read the book. But so it was really fun to talk to her, and she actually gave me some props if you want to see them.
Yes, please show us the props.
It's so cool. I feel like I'm the museum of Playboy bunnies.
Yep. Oh my god.
So this is her costume.
Oh my god.
Isn't that wild? It still smells like perfume. Like
perfume and like Manhattan's being stirred and like
everything's like the opposite. I feel like a weather person.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all flipped around.
So there's her
oh my god.
And then check out the inside.
Have you tried it on, Christine?
No, but I'm kind of thinking about it.
If you don't want to, send it my way and I'll try it on.
But it feels like there's sand in here. Can you hear it?
Gosh. Yeah.
And it's really stiff. And then she told me that these stays in the back, that for some women, they would, if they were built wrong, they would actually hit their kidneys and they'd get kidney infections and would have to leave. So that's the costume. And I love it that it's orange because it totally goes with the colors that they chose to market the book.
Yep.
And then do you want to see a Playboy bunny tail.
Yes, I do.
On the black market, by the way, these are worth a ton of money.
Like, how awful is that it's like a tail? Like, it's just so horrible, but like, it's also fascinating. Look at this. That's the tail.
Oh, yeah.
Have you tried the tail on?
Like, can you imagine it's like wearing that, and then here are the snaps that they use to put them on. So
that is so cool. Does she have the ears? Did she keep her ears?
Everyone asks me. I haven't worn the ears yet. I'm going to have to find a pair. She said she thinks she might have some that I can borrow, but for launch week, I don't have ears.
Oh God, I just can't even get over that. That's seriously cool that you have like the costume. Like, that's the type of thing that needs to be in like a glass, like shadow box, like with like on the wall with like if I had that, it would be like on my wall, and I'd be like, this is what I like.
I should actually, as a gift for her, that's a great idea.
That is a good idea. You should do that. If you can find a picture of her too, like to put it like a black and white picture, and like that'd be cool. Anyway, back to the book. let's get back to the book for a minute, which is so it's just so cool. So how different is the published version of this book from your original concept? Obviously, like, your original concept was very different, but once you went Playboy, once you decided you were in the Playboy world, what was the process like? Did you hit any big writing obstacles along the way? Did you hit any? You say you're a pantser, so like when you're writing like that, does that mean like if you get stuck, you're stuck for a little bit? Like, how do you get yourself unstuck? Tell me about the process of this book and how it evolved, how you overcame some obstacles, and how different it is now than.
That's such a great question, because it really did change a lot. So first of all, I had just over a year to work on this book. I had a 2-book contract, so I had a deadline to finish the book, which for me was great because I could, if on my own, 7 years. Plus, it's a gift if you're doing research to have a deadline, because otherwise you go down a rabbit hole. But originally,
a bunny hole.
Oh yeah, bunny hole. They actually,
sorry, I couldn't resist.
Well, retired bunnies call themselves rabbits.
Yes, yeah, I liked that. When we're older, are we rabbits? Yeah.
But yeah, no. So I started out, and my very original draft was about this guy named Fabian who was going to the Playboy Resort for the first time, and my agent read the early chapter, and she was like, she called me. I love my agent. And for those of you out there who are writers, like, one thing that my editor said that was great is she said that it's really great for an agent to have a different personality than you do. Which, because I thought I wanted someone just like me, and my agent's so great. I love her, but she's like Brooklyn, and she's really straightforward. And she was like, I don't write this book with a male protagonist. It's more interesting to think about a woman's experience in Playboy and like that. And so I just took the whole like 50 pages I'd written and chucked them. And and then I got a concussion. And I walked into a door. So for like a month, I just like words just floated off the page, and I was like, how am I ever going to finish this? But then my brain started working again, and maybe it was good to take that little break, to hesitate. And then I had a really convoluted story. Like, in the original version, Sherry had a sister named Donna. And now Donna is the neighbor. She's the mother of Ray Lee, the little kid. Yep. And so it just was really convoluted. And there was going to be this, I was originally going to have Donna come back from living in California, and she had a secret, and Sherry was going to have to choose between a Playboy bunny and taking care of her niece. Yeah. And then I was talking to my editor, and she's like, why don't you just make this a story focused on Sherry and make it a coming of age story? And at first I thought, oh, that's so much work. And then I just started cutting out stuff, and it really was maybe 12 pages that I lost. And it was just a great exercise in trimming and being open to the idea of changing your narrative. Yeah. And my editor could not have been more on the money. It was such great advice. And she always has such good advice. It's nice to work with someone who does this all the time. Yeah. So I just started focusing more on Sherry's journey as she, learned how to become a Playboy bunny and grow into her own. And I had originally had a proposal of what the book was going to be, and I should look it up because it ended up being something completely different. And it's nice to work with people who give you the freedom to be able to do that, to take the story your own. Because I just felt like there were things that needed to happen for Sherry that were surprises to me and then surprises to everybody. So
it's so interesting to hear about that, because it's just, I mean, putting a book out into the world is a collaborative effort, because you do have editors and your agent to kind of, you know, work with and kind of revise ideas. And I think, do you think you're, you know, you've taught fiction for many, many years. Do you think your ability, your experience as a teacher has, you know, kind of informed this ability of yours to change directions and take notes and, you know, be willing to edit? And, you know, are there any other ways in which you think that teaching has influenced you as an actual writer?
I love that question. I think like my favorite thing about teaching that helped me as a writer is it, like every day you're out there telling your students about a story or a book, and you get excited about it. And it just always reminds you, like, stories matter.
Yeah.
Literature matters. It's important. What we do is valuable. It's not light, you know, like it's something that is an exercise in helping people create more empathy and understanding our world and understanding ourselves. So I think like just the integrity of writing is something that teaching always taught me. And then I always focused on editing, because I often had students who would, you know, one of the best and worst things that can happen for a student when they're in high school is to have someone say, like, you're such an amazing writer, you're brilliant. Because then they just want to be told over and over again that their writing is great. Or you have students who might be really, really great, but the first time they put something on the page isn't so great, and then they think they're terrible writers.
Yeah.
So I think focusing on revision is a way to, you can always make a manuscript better. I mean, I guess sometimes you can also write the life out of a book or a manuscript as well. But in general, if you're doing it thoughtfully, and nothing is wasted.
Yeah.
Any content you have is always, you can always use it later. But I always, I don't know. I love editing. For me, the hard part is getting the story down.
Interesting. That's so you prefer the editing phase as opposed to the first draft kind of phase.
I don't know if I prefer it, because there are different thrills and delights and frustrations from both processes. But for me, I have a really hard time making decisions. Like I literally get stomach aches just deciding like what flavor jam to buy at the grocery store, you know, like, so imagine what I'm like, what could my character's name be, you know? So
that's good to know, because I'm the same way. I'm like, oh, it could be this, or it could be this, or it could be this, or this, or this, or this. So how do you make the decision? How have you learned to make decisions over time?
I think Rebecca Mackay, who's a friend, she gave me really good advice. She was like, just decide something and move on.
Yeah.
You know, everything will be a decision. Don't be too precious about it. Just make the decision. And I really needed to hear someone tell me that. And when she did, that helped a lot. But that's not to say I don't, like right now I'm working on my third book. And people will say, like, they always ask me in interviews how long, like, what's my process? How many hours a day do I write? And a lot of writers will say, I always write for 4 hours every day, no matter what. But for me, I can't do that, because at different phases of your progress or of your project, you're doing different kinds of work. And so like right now, I'm generating a new novel right now, and it's exhausting. Like I can do that for 2 or 3 hours and I'm spent for the day, and I consider myself having done a lot. When I'm editing, I can edit for 10 to 12 hours a day. When I was at that very end of shoulder season, I was editing so furiously, like literally at the end of the day, I couldn't even blink my eyes, because I just wanted to get it done. And I wanted to remember all my little details that I had to make sure I like carried that thread through, and thank God for copy editors later on, but I wanted to be as thorough as I could. So that can take a long time.
I love this. This is such a great conversation. I want to encourage everyone. I know we've got a couple questions in the chat. We're going to get to those in just a second. And if you have any other questions, please enter them into the chat now, and we'll get to as many as we possibly can. I have, a couple more questions from me. One is, I want to just switch gears for a second and talk about some of your other writing. I actually saw that our wonderful producer today, Trisha Blanchett, is posting in the chat, and she posted some links to some of your articles. And you wrote this wonderful op-ed for the Washington Post about seeing your son go off to college, which I'm a new mom. I have an 8.5-month-old baby girl.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And it's no, I mean, it's a ride, right? And this transition to parenthood is such an interesting thing, especially as somebody who, I've been a creative person my whole life. So like I've answered to nobody but myself for my entire life. And now I hate the question of like, how are you a mom and a writer at the same time? Because I think that's stupid. Mm-hmm. But I love your perspective on motherhood. Like this idea of like, yes, this is, every transition in your child's life is going to be difficult for moms, but maybe it's not the end of the world. And maybe we are people besides being mothers. Like you seem to be somebody who has a really good handle on these both equally important parts of like, I am an artist and a creative, mm-hmm. but I am also a mom and a wife and a person. What do you think being a mother being a mother has had any sort of impact on your work as a writer and vice versa? And if so, like, what do you think it is?
I think, well, mostly being a mom, like you have to learn to juggle time. And in some ways I felt like I was more productive when my kids were little because you realize like you just didn't have much time. So you just had to get the writing in. Yeah. But I had this boss, I used to work for IBM and I had this boss named Diane and she was older than I was. And I remember once I was talking about how I felt guilty working and having my kids see me work and stuff. And she was like, you should never feel guilty about that. She's like, what are you raising your daughter to do? To just be at home all the time and take care of her own kids? Is that what you want for her? Or do you want her to also pursue her own professional life? She's like, you're setting such a good role model. You're being a good role model for your daughter by showing her that you work and that your work matters. Yeah. And that was really great advice because she was probably about the age of your child now when she told me that. So I thought about that a lot. I also think it's really great to create boundaries. It's really important to pursue your own perspectives. You don't want all of a sudden your kid grow up and then look at your husband and be like, wait, who are you?
Yeah.
Like all we did was talk about our kids for 18 years. And then suddenly I didn't want that. I was really scared that would happen. Yeah. So I always tried to carve out time for my husband and to give my kids experiences independent from me. I was not a helicopter mom. And I don't know.
That's a gift that you can give your children too, of like not being like saying, I trust you and like letting them kind of, develop themselves as a person too, without you. Like that's like, right. I like your style. I just wanted to say that. I like your perspective on it.
Think about what it's like for people with COVID, having been with their kids all the time, like maybe that it's going to be hard to either break out of that or to maybe that makes it all the more important and urgent for people to create some boundaries. I don't know, but and also I just want to say it is so much fun having adult kids. Like you have something to totally look forward to. You don't need to be sad at every passage. You can just think, oh, this is getting me closer to the day when I can go hang out at a bar with my kid. Like it's the best. We have so much fun together.
It's so funny. Like some people hate that. They hate that as their kids get older. I'm like, let's get them older. Let's go out, guys. Let's do stuff.
It does go fast though. I can't believe my kids are so old now. I mean, I'm like, what was my daughter? She was like, Mom, I'm going to lose my health insurance next year. I was like, oh my God. What's happening?
I love it. Let's do a couple questions from the audience. Sylvia asked, I'd like to know, she said, in your research, did you uncover just how much bunnies earned? Ooh.
Yeah, a lot of people couldn't remember exactly how much they earned, but somebody told me they made like $13 an hour, which in 1981 is a ton. I think
that's a lot of money in 1981. Yeah.
I think minimum wage was like $2 something. And that was definitely like not everywhere, like Playboy I don't know how universal the pay was, but at the resorts, tips. And also you'd make more in the summer because you're busier. So in the winter, it might have averaged out to not be so much. But one of the bunnies told me that you could make a ton of money working in the back rooms. Like you would go the back room of the golf lounge, and they would play high stakes poker and you'd sit there and there's a scene actually where Sherry talks about that, where you can make a lot of money. You could also make money doing special events. So I had like one scene I put in there. It's true. It's based on a real story where the bunnies would wrestle like volunteer firefighters in these small towns for a fundraiser for 4-H, and they'd get paid a ton of money, or they'd get like a free scooter for being part of a Bob Hope Classic golf thing. They'd get these huge gifts or a huge bottle of Polo cologne. Yep. So there are a lot of perks of being a bunny. You could work at car shows, just like standing in front of a car. So you could make a lot of extra money in addition to the regular money you'd make.
That's really interesting. Christina asks, how do you balance setting as a character without consuming the characters?
I don't know. I think that's a really interesting question, but I think they
That's
just
a great question.
feed off each other. I mean, maybe in some ways, maybe one of the problems with my writing is maybe I've indulged the place a little bit too much in the setting. But I think from teaching creative writing for so many years to college students, you realize a lot of times they just need to put their characters in a scene.
Yeah.
And so it made me aware of that in my own writing. Like, just put them in a scene, make them do something, make the world real. And so that's something that I try to do.
I love that. And Sylvia had another, here's another one. Was it difficult to release your debut novel, The Second Home, during the pandemic? What was that
No,
like?
it was totally great. It
was exactly what I always dreamed of, right?
It was a dream come true. I think the hardest part, honestly, it came out on June 2nd, which is right after the riots. And the day that my launch came out, there was a social media blackout. And how do you? I mean, I'm not going to violate that. Like, and my press couldn't really do much either. So, and it was well intentioned. So you don't want to sound like you're going against the ideas behind that.
Of course.
But it did kind of suck to have a book out and be like,
of course.
I was just kind of at home, like, my book came out today, and then. On Tuesday, I went and had a big book signing at the bookstore in East Troy, and there were so many people there. They sold 112 books in one day.
That's awesome.
And people were buying books, and they were like, "I've never had an author sign a book before." It's like, oh, this is so cool, because people love having their town represented.
I love it. Yeah.
And we danced. We learned how to do the bunny dip. Bunny Jojo was there, and I on the one hand, I was like, "This is so great! I get to experience it." But at the same time, I thought, oh, I wonder what I missed out on from The Second Home. But the great thing about writing a book is it's a long game.
Yeah.
And I thought your book would be out for a few weeks, and then it's like yesterday's news.
Yeah.
But that's not true. It takes a while for people to read it, to tell their friends about it, for it to gain momentum. And I feel like I'm still constantly hearing from readers and meeting book clubs from people who are just finally getting around to reading The Second Home now. And now hopefully they'll want to read it more if they read Shoulder Season.
Yep.
Definitely. Yeah. So, and who knows, maybe if there wasn't a pandemic, maybe it wouldn't have gotten picked up for TV because people had time to read.
Yeah. Yeah. And let's talk a little bit about that. How did you learn that The Second Home was going to be made into a TV show? And can you give us any updates on that process?
Sure. Well, I mean, it all
it's weird.
Yeah, it's so wild. I never thought that Game of Thrones and Second Home would have any kind of intersection. But it was just surprising. I just got an email from my agent. She'll always say when there's good news, she'll say, "Call me." So she'll text me. So I always know that's a good thing. So she told me about it, and I actually knew about it for almost a year, but I couldn't say anything until the contracts were signed. That's the thing with Hollywood; it takes a really long time. And the whole time I thought, this is not going to happen. This is not real. Whose life is this? And then it's with TriStar, who optioned, which is a division of Sony. And that's a big studio. I was like, TriStar, even I know who TriStar is. And so then then Nikolai Coster-Waldau had to sign all of his paperwork to become the executive producer in The Star. And I guess there's 2 different forms, so that takes a while.
Yep.
And the whole time I thought, he's going to get busy. He's going to be asked to do something else. This is never going to work out.
Yeah.
And so far, so good. I think they said that they were hiring a showrunner and getting a writer involved. And all I want is to pick maybe one of the songs for a soundtrack, and I want to meet him. So
you'll get to meet him. You'll get that. That's cool. I mean, TV is it's a whole other game. It's an interesting thing. But that's so exciting. I can't I am all for more book to screen adaptations, particularly the limited series. I think that's such a great way to do it, because often a movie misses so much because a book has so much detail. Mm-hmm. I think it's a great way to do it. And we're in this golden age of TV now that it's just perfect.
Yeah.
It's perfect for it.
I'd love it if Shoulder Season was picked up. I don't know what's happening with that. I know they're shopping it or whatever. I think part of what one of my friends who's in film, just totally independently of everything else, but he said, what would be great is to just figure out a good actress to play Sherry. And I'm not really I don't follow a lot of pop culture. I don't know who that would be. So if you guys get ideas,
Yeah,
So
let's
when
cast the movie.
Yeah, or tag that person on Instagram, like post the book and tag them and be like, you'd be a great Sherry Taylor.
Yeah. I feel like we need like a younger Scarlett Johansson because she's supposed to be a little younger in the book, right? So like we need somebody like that that's like got that kind of like innocence, but also like the edge, like, you know, like that's, we need the edge. I love it. Sylvia had another great question. I'd like to know what book checks all the boxes, read literature, in your opinion.
Oh, I have two that pop into my head. I'm sure there are more, but these are just the ones I'm thinking of now. But my friend Daniel Golden owns a bookstore called Boswell, and he always knows what I'm going to like. So one day he just put a book in my hands and said, read this. Don't read what it's about, because if you do, you won't want to read it. But trust me, I know you're going to love it. And the book was All My Puny Sorrows by Miriam Teves. I heard you spell her last name Toews, but you say
Toews.
And it's like, it's funny, but it's doleful and it's sad and it's beautiful. I fell in love with that narrator. Like I want to be my best friend. So I just love that book. I recommend it to everyone. And when I do, people email me and they're like, thank you for telling me about All My Puny Sorrows. Yep. And then the other book is Marilyn Robinson's book, Housekeeping. I've taught that. I've read it 100 times. And I actually think so much of that book has made its way into both of my books, you know, with these themes of like, should we stay in one place?
Yep.
Should we go explore the world? How is domesticity, you know, impinging on my ability to lead a good life, or is it making my life better? I don't know. I just love that book.
That's awesome. Great recommendations. Christina, can we get a closer look at the cover? Do you want to hold up another copy and show us the cover?
I want to tell us a little bit about the cover. And people who buy it are like, oh my gosh, what's really cool if you feel the paper.
Yeah.
So people keep telling me they like the way this book feels. And I'm kind of friends with the person who designed the book. And I sent her a message on Instagram and I said, all we talk about is the paper. And she said, so my press gave away matchbooks with Sherry on them as a little like tchotchke.
Yep.
Because in the old days, for those of you who are old enough to remember, you'd collect matchbooks from the resorts. So the paper is supposed to feel like a matchbook. Isn't that amazing?
That's cool. I like that. It does it does actually feel like a matchbook. Now that you say that. That's cool.
Yeah, and then the sign. Can you even believe that sign? I've never seen anything like it.
I love that.
And like check out the back.
It's so beautiful.
This book is so like, I just think both my books, I just think they're just gorgeous. I never paid attention to imprints or presses before I published a book. Yeah. But now after working with St. Martin's Press, I'd buy any book they publish. Like they're just, they really do such a great job. Like a family that they're run by a woman. They're like, every single person I've worked with, like I never feel anxious or nervous. I just know they've got my back. Like they've been great. And the book cover is just an example of that.
I love that. Christina, what are you working on right now? Can you tell us?
Yeah, well, I'm working on a book that, you know, when you were asking about, do you choose a place to write about? I didn't really want to write another book set in Wisconsin because I thought, I'm going to get pegged as a regional writer, which I guess like, what's wrong with that anyway? But I went for a walk on Lake Geneva and I saw this place called Congress Club, which is this old family camp that has 10 houses, 10 old cottages and a clubhouse in the middle. And I was researching it. I don't know why, I was just captivated by it. And there was one detail where it said in this article about it that the houses were built without bathrooms, without kitchens, because they wanted everybody to eat every meal together. And all the people who lived there also lived in Chicago together on the same street.
Ooh.
And so the whole book started with the question, what if you don't like these people? So I just
so good. Oh, I love this.
And it's set in 1927. And I'm really having fun with it. I'm hopefully going to be able to dive back in to writing after all the launch craziness.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Well, we'll look forward to that. In the meantime, everyone, please pick up Shoulder Season. Christina, do you want to give a shout out to some independent bookstores, maybe some that have signed copies if folks are in the area or if they want to ship?
Oh, sure. Well, I mean, lucky me, I know so many bookstores that I feel so guilty, like not including all the bookstores. I know. It's supportive, like Titcomb's right by you. Yeah. It's been fantastic. And
they're wonderful.
I'll just for now, just focus on the Wisconsin bookstores that I've been really active with. And in Madison, it's Mystery to Me. Nearby Spring Green is Arcadia Books, which they've been so supportive. The Inklink bookstore is actually right in East Troy. And that's in my husband's family's hardware store. And Inklink is a great, I mean, that town would not be the same without Inklink. And then Boswell Books in Milwaukee. So any of those venues would be great. And and Books and Company in Economowoc, the 5 O's. One of the Bunnies is from Economowoc. And I can easily, if you want me to sign a book or personalize it, if you're giving it as a gift, any one of those bookstores, I'd be happy to stop by. I'll be there. And I can always just, if you buy it ahead of time, I'll just go and personalize it and they'll send it out.
Oh, I love it. Christina, it was you are wonderful. It was so much fun talking to you. You're just like a burst of sunshine. And your book is great. This was such a fun conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to everyone who joined us on social media, and thank you for the conversation and all of the great questions. Thank you, Trisha Blanchett, for running this behind the scenes, and Alex Hoops for helping us with our social media promotion. I'm Jenna Paone. Thank you for joining us on Lit Chick today, and we will see you next week for another awesome book discussion. And in the meantime, read Shoulder Season and enjoy.
Thank you, Jenna.
Thank you, Christina.